And I wanted to ask you, well, how do you think we should work in the 21st century with those major cultural issues, especially if they are of such a traumatic experience? This question seems to me very interesting. I'm going to be speaking from the standpoint of a museum worker, because people come to the museum maybe not even to see, not only to see the physical objects and items and artifacts, and they do not do that anymore. They want to see that digital. Museum is about its stock, it's about its artifacts, about the exhibitions it performs. For the museum, it's, the major issue right now is that everybody is trying to pursue this. And everybody is trying to do things interactively and digitally, and at the same time remaining a local space where it all gets stored, where people come for impressions and atmosphere they can find nowhere else. While in the Chernobyl case, Chernobyl Museum, this is a local place or localized venue. But some other places are randomly set up, and you need to encourage people to come over there. From what I can see, when other museums, how other museums do that, it's important to catch up, run digital projects, like the Holodomor application was related to the limited space, and we cannot accept all the people at one time. But we can show the app and show the story much broader about the Holodomor. You can find the history of Holodomor, but in the streets of Kiev, and you can do this by yourself. This all matched with the beginning of COVID and lockdown things, and there are many questions that we purposely created the app just because it was locked down. No, it was not the case. This was a global trend. We wanted to go out of the box, out of our base physical venue, and be accessible to the people who want to come, but they are not able to come physically to the place, but they can access this from all around the world. So this seems to be, it's very important to maintain your own value, being the museum. And like I said, this is all about these stocks and artifacts and collections. And it's very important to keep the balance. That on the one hand, you run projects and they are awareness building that can be disseminated. They are produced by the museum, but not necessarily one needs to attend it. And at the same time, the museum needs to keep its brand as an institution so that people could come over, spend their time. So whenever tourists arrive to Ukraine, they could go and see Chernobyl or Holodomor museums, the Museum of Arts or Historical Museum. So we need to actually tell people that it's not just a waste of time, but this is going to be an interesting leisure, an interesting experience. And the museums are now currently using a lot of state-of-the-art technologies. They run modern projects that engage multimedia, video, and other solutions. Also, VR is becoming more and more popular and getting the momentum. In many expositions, it's used heavily. They create a lot of avatars, so people arrive to the museum and they get an avatar. They need to go through the exposition with the same avatar. And those are very interesting developments. So I'm sure if we're discussing the future, they will be evolving, but it's very important not to be disrupted from the real world, from the tangible things. Well, I'm talking about the museum right here. And the value of the items, of the artifacts, is just because we managed to keep it, we managed to preserve it. But the other things can help discover those items and those artifacts that a person cannot see in real life. So all this has to be used at the same time maintaining our memory about those root causes and sources, the grassroots, regarding what had happened in the past. We need to stress this through every project, whatever modern or contemporary it could be. We need to stress this and keep that in mind, of course. That's the point of view from the museum. I think this is an adequate and progressive thing. As for the museum, because we were talking to a lot of museums, and I cannot see a lot of understanding about this. There is also Chernobyl app, and when I was talking to many museums, they really take a very strategic approach to this. That's a separate story about criticism, whether... No, I never heard that. I've been talking to a lot of museum people, and we were taking a look at what they have. And I also saw that they take a very critical approach to digital projects. They are not very conscious about this. And on the contrary, in different European places, they are open to this. And this is part of their objective for the years to come. So they are not only the museums, but they're also engaged in information delivery to the people and awareness raising. Those digital means, they are just new communication channels that do not have to be forgotten. Otherwise, nothing's going to work. In the EU funding programs like Horizon, Erasmus, and Creative Europe, they all are taking care of their preserving the heritage. And this is a cross-cutting issue that engages culture. They're not only involved in digitalization, but they're also digitalizing cultural heritage and trying to maintain it through digital projects. It's not only about digitalizing, but they also create digital archives, websites, and collections. They use a lot of innovative solutions. If I were to tell about this in a Ukrainian museum, they would think I'm probably crazy, I'm out of my mind. There's the Louvre Museum. They have the website, and the number of website visitors is much greater than the number of physical visitors in person. It's just an archive. It's not a very progressive website, but you can see all the pictures, all the paintings. Many institutions used to write to them, okay, give us access to some of the paintings, we want to see them. And it was a lot of exchange of letters, a lot of paperwork. But at the same time, right now, it is now happening digitally with no red tape. They have increased the number of their research and studies. So access is provided to everybody to their archives. So the communication has accelerated hundreds of times. And with these digital technologies, I think this is their advantage. During the lockdown, we were all convinced that the Clubhouse and other social media, and there are so many online events that created a lot of access to best speakers around the world. Everybody has become a lot more open. I've attended so many events where I saw the people who I would never meet in my entire life. In no panel discussion, I would do that because those are mega people. I would never probably be invited to such a top of the range conference with so many VIPs who shared a lot of expertise on different projects. Thank you very much for your comment. Hanna Korolevska, are you with us? Anna? Yes, I'm with you. We would like to also discuss this issue with you, where we have shared a lot about it, regarding the new technologies and how to work with cultural heritage in the 21st century. Oh, yes, indeed, I fully agree with what you said and what the colleagues of yours did. This is indeed very important. Digital is something great. And at our museum here, it's quite a specific museum. You remember probably because we work with artifacts that are contagious. They still have radiation around them. We cannot always fetch those artifacts to the people to touch them or hold them in their hands, because they're contaminated. back in 1992 when we had started creating the museum, and I just realized that our path is in the digitalization. Back in 1992, we started implementing those solutions. So we installed PCs. There was no Windows, no modern multimedia. We had several computers in our place, and our visitors could use those computers. So we collected those softwares from real experts. We collected the databases regarding the catastrophe about those chemical and radiological hazards that had taken place before that. We had collected information about the nuclear power security, and all those were little softwares that we were demonstrating in our museum. And we were the first ones back in 1992 to have generated uh, so many different domestic use dose meters. We this way wanted to tell like red sensors. So we generated on a computer how this dose rate meter sounds. And when I was actually engaged in this, I then realized that all those things are important. This is the real journey for our museum. This is the growth path to collect classified historic documents, and digital is always walking along with us. And we were the first museum ever in Ukraine to have implemented not only the digital collections, but also we let the visitors use that not online, but there when they attended the exposition. It's not just about slideshows or digital albums or video sets. No, we created those modern museum databases. So we're walking on this path and we continue to. Here's one thing I want to mention as well here. We do not have to replace the digital things, I mean, the real things by the digital ones, by those tangible artifacts. They need to walk hand in hand together, both the traditional museum and the digital solutions. Different mobile apps that are being developed right now, all those digital projects and multimedia projects and art and media projects, they all have to encourage people to come over to the museum still, to come over and see and feel and one-on-one learn the topic from the real artifacts. This is something I would like to emphasize about Chernobyl, because this is a really special museum, and this is indeed an extraordinary case. Every year, our museum is becoming more and more popular. Many more people are coming to visit our place from all over the world, I should say. That's why we can see we have people from the countries where they only started or still planning to actually build NPPs. We look at those countries and we can see that many people arrive to us from Poland. We can see there is something going on in Poland, probably. So yes, we did. We were trying to dig and find information. Indeed, they're trying to build their NPPs. A lot of people from Turkey as well. People are not neglectful. And through the technology, People can feel affinity, can feel what has to be done to make sure they are safe, and we need to help these people through our museums to help them realize what safety is. They need to perceive the negative lessons learned, and not just the negative, but also the heroic lessons learned. And all these things we need to do working at our museums, right? Thank you, Hannah. Yeah, I'm quite confident we will be developing those technologies in the future. I'm going to tell you a bit more details when I'm talking about my museum, our museum. All those things are important. I'm very supportive of those digital projects all the time. I'm criticized a lot by my other peers at the museum that I'm very encouraged by those digital technologies, not only by making things digital. I mean, many museums understand that we need to digitize our collections and share them in the online databases to provide access to the people. But I'm sure museums need to have other formats as well. That's something I wanted to share with you. Okay, regarding the visitors from Poland and Turkey, they are also actively visiting the exclusion zone. We had people who travel a lot. I think this is because the situation they had survived in the country that was nearby, that was part of the Soviet Union, they seem to have no affinity to the situation, but they also suffered from those negative trends that happened in Europe. They know there was Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union was trying to actually talk through the triggers of the guns. And yes, indeed, when I was talking to the Polish people, they perceived Soviet Union negatively. And when something went wrong in those countries through technology and everything, and not a lot of people had known about the tragedy then, they thought there had been a major global catastrophe like COVID-19 today is. There was a lot of panic. They realized this is something of the global scale that will be continuously present in their minds for years to come. So they recall the stories, how they lived and how they were expecting that cloud flying to them, on them from the Soviet Union. Of course, this was reflected in their culture, in their perception of the world, and over time, when the boundaries were opened, they were able to come over. So they're actively traveling to the exclusion zone to learn more about Chernobyl. I know in Poland, Chernobyl used to be much more popular than here in Ukraine. After the HBO series, Chernobyl has become very, very popular around the world. Many people keep asking, why are you still doing this? Chernobyl is over. Why do we have to talk about this? But the movie series, I mean, this is something that has given the new impetus to people want to go to the past, retrieve the history. And in Poland, this has always been the case, and they were always participating actively in the cultural project discussions. There are even the games that they develop on Chernobyl. They're very, very actively engaged. Not many people talk about this, but the Poles, they are being very proactive. They were creating one project called Chernobyl 360, So they traveled to the exclusion zone and supported by the National Exclusion Zone Agency. They scanned a lot of different places and locations, not just the bow, but I mean that's one of the important places, the Ark, I mean. So they created a game for this. And all that was then put into the gameplay. It was still nice to have access to this information. Natalia, are you with us? Excuse me, we never mentioned Japan yet. We're going to be talking about Japan when we have the next panel. The similarity with Fukushima is quite apparent. Japan is actively participating. At the beginning of the 90s, we're working actively with the victims of Chernobyl, and they were very actively. No, actually, we were talking to the Fukushima victims, as far as I understand, because we were actually helping them meet our victims, and those were great meetings with our victims and those in Japan, from Japan. And there in Japan, they started creating civil society organizations to help our victims recover from the Chernobyl catastrophe in Kiev. And then in 2011, when Fukushima case happened, our victims also started to actively assist those victims in Japan by sharing the last possessions and things they'd had. Those people realize what pain is all about, what is radiation, and what is the long-term impact from such a traumatic case that can be reflected not only in this generation that's living today, but also in the future generations. Because this is something that is not quite well studied. This is why Japan is a special place for us. And right now, Fukushima people, they come over to us to get our experience, and the museum is also supportive of this. I was there in Japan twice, and I delivered my own lecture or lectures and shared experience from Chernobyl and the experience of working with the victims, with the social workers and first responders. This is something they're interested in, and they're now organizing something like this in their place. They are not calling them those museums, but they're calling them centers. But our museum can also be called the Center of Culture and Awareness Building.